Welcome back to the Upside Sports Network. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us on a Friday evening. Not a lot happened in the world of baseball today, but there's still plenty of rumors to talk about, and welcome into the Upside Sports Network. Again, we cover Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NBA, and the NHL. We'll keep you guys updated on pretty much everything that happens from all four major sports. So without further ado, let's get right to it. Of course, the hot stove season already got off to a great start this week, of course, with the winter meetings, all the free agents that signed anyway. It was a very good, active winter meetings from that perspective. The one thing that we didn't really see, though, was a whole lot of trades, and that's kind of what I'm expecting the next thing to kind of happen right now, especially with the top guys finally coming off the board. We did get one piece of information, of course, is that the New York Yankees are certainly the heaviest team in right now for Carlos Rodon, while the Mets are also the most heavy team right now for Kodai Senga. We'll see if they end up getting both of those starting pitchers, but that would be a great thing for the New York market anyway. They had a rough start to the beginning of the offseason, of course, with the loss of Jacob deGrom. If you're a Mets fan, all the acrimony around Aaron Judge, possibly going to the Giants, thanks to a tweet from John Heyman. Both New York fan bases have had a rough go of it so far this offseason, but both have recovered nicely, bringing in Justin Verlander, Jose Quintana, Brandon Nimmo, David Robertson, keeping Edwin Diaz. The Mets have done very well. They're still looking to spend even more to improve that team. It's looking more and more likely that they're going to have a payroll that exceeds $350 million or more by the end of this offseason. For the New York Yankees, of course, their big piece that they needed to keep was Aaron Judge. They were able to keep him 9 years, $360 million. They do need to improve that rotation. We already got news, of course, of the Carlos Rodon thing. I still think they're going to get some more pieces to go there. But you think Senga's going to go to the Pirates? I think the Pirates Padres are still in there, excuse me. But I think they're going to be right there as well. I haven't seen news yet on where he's going to end up being, but the Mets are right there. I believe the Padres are going to be in there along with the services of Chris Bassett. Whichever one ends up getting Senga, I think Bassett probably goes the other direction as well. One team that I'm waiting for something to happen anyway is the Toronto Blue Jays. I know we have a lot of Blue Jays fans that usually are in our chat, but they've been relatively quiet so far this offseason. Haven't been able to land the big fish. They made the trade, of course, for trading away Teoscar Hernandez. That's the biggest move they've made so far. And they're going to have to make some additions. Our left-handed hitting outfielder is exactly what they need right now. There's a lot of rumors about them being a match for Brian Reynolds, and they're going to need to make something happen in order to improve that team, especially with the things that the other teams in that division have done to make themselves a little bit better. Of course, the Orioles have added a nice piece here and there as far as veterans, but they're just going to get better purely off of another year in the major leagues because so much of their roster is so young. Just from experience, they're going to get better. Of course, we know the Yankees, of course, brought back Aaron Judge. They're going to bring in a starting pitcher, and they're going to fill out that rotation as well. Appreciate you guys joining us. Welcome back, Bryce. Welcome back, Mark, Anthony. Welcome in, Andres. If you guys are new to the Upside, make sure you hit that subscribe button and like the video. It really does help us out. See if we can boost our numbers and do this for you guys full time. But let's go Padres. Senga going to go to the Padres. We'll see where he ends up going. I think the Padres are going to be right there along with Chris Bassett. Good evening. Just wondering any trades or free agent signings from the Anaheim Angels during the weekend or so. We could see a trade, I believe, from the Anaheim Angels, or the LA Angels of Anaheim anyway. But for me, they need to bring in a catcher. We got a good article anyway from a couple of different sources anyways that said that they were very much interested in bringing in Wilson Contreras. That apparently was the surprise team in the mix for him as far as the team with a 5 or a 6 year offer on the table for him. But of course, he ended up going to the St. Louis Cardinals. I expect the Angels to be able to bring in a catcher. They need to improve that spot, I believe, to make their roster a little bit better. But as far as the who they could bring in, Sean Murphy is a popular name because every team that needs a catcher is looking for that level of production with that good of a defensive player as well. Danny Jansen. Now that the Cardinals have gotten their guy at catcher, maybe they go out to Toronto and see if they can make something work there. But maybe a trade of Joe Adell going the other way, just a failed prospect that might get another lease on life in Toronto. It's going to cost more than that, don't get me wrong, but the Angels are going to do something at catcher, so kind of keep your eyes peeled for that one. Does Ronald Tapia play outfield? Or Raimel Tapia play outfield? He's an outfielder, yes, although I do not like the Yankees at all. Okay. I mean, as far as the Yankees go, I mean, they have a lot of questions this offseason. I'm very curious to see what their next step is after they brought back Aaron Judge. I wonder what part of the pitch was that he was speaking pretty much exclusively with Hal Steinbrenner through the entire process. He actually visited the Steinbrenner home down in Tampa Bay. That was part of the reason why he was at the football game for the Buccaneers that evening anyway. But he was already in the Tampa Bay area talking with New York Yankees owners. And I'm very curious to see what they do as far as their plan going forward. Are they going to go cheap with the starting rotation and say, well, we really like to bring in Carlos Rodon, but we're only willing to do it if he's $25 million a year as opposed to 30? The market is looking more and more likely that he's going to get a 7-year contract at this point, and there's still a few teams that are interested in bringing him in. I know the Giants are looking to possibly bringing him back. I know the Twins are actively looking for an ace-level starting pitcher. And remember last offseason when Carlos Correa's market got a little bit dried up, and the more and more it went on, that the Twins were actually able to fleece him from the market and get him there on a 1-year deal. Now, sure, it cost them $35 million for 1 year, and he opted out a year later. But the Twins are a sneaky option for Carlos Rodon. They need a number one at the head of that rotation. And then you've got a very solid rotation behind him as well. The trade they made to bring in Maile, they have Gray. Maeda could return at some point. They have Sonny Gray. I can't remember if I said his name as well. But the Twins are going to have a good rotation. I think they need an ace to make it a great rotation. And that division is very winnable. There's nobody in that division that you look at and go, hey, they're an unbeatable team. We're never going to be able to get anywhere in this division because this team is in our division. You can't say that about the AL Central. So I believe there's 3 teams that legitimately have a chance to contend in that division. You're looking at the Chicago White Sox, Cleveland Guardians, and the Minnesota Twins. If they get an ace at the front of that rotation, that could change things for the Twins about their outlook going forward. Respect the Cardinals. They're a cool, fun team. I mean, the Cardinals are one of the most respected organizations in the league. Just the way they're able to compete and never really go into a full teardown. They always are churning in young talent. They've never really given out the big free agent contract either. Don't get me wrong, they've made some really nice additions. Paul Goldschmidt, however, that was on a 1-year deal that they were able to get him from the Arizona Diamondbacks. Didn't cost him a whole lot because he only had 1 year left on the deal. They took advantage of the Colorado Rockies' poor management, making that big contract offer to Arenado, and then ultimately getting a nice deal for him as well, getting the Rockies to eat some of that money as well, while they had to go out there, or while the Rockies a year later go out there and bring in Chris Bryant, essentially for similar money that they would have had left on the Arenado deal if they had just kept Nolan Arenado to begin with. Everyone here in Anaheim likes Swanson, Senga, or Bassett, I think is what you're trying to say, Andres. I think they could use a shortstop. Swanson could be within their budget. Senga, I'm not sure if they'd be in the market for him. I'm not sure of the fit long term. I think Senga's going to look at how things worked out for Ohtani and say, it didn't exactly work out there, might not be for me. And then as far as Chris Bassett, he's looking for one real chance to cash in. And if they are still looking for starting pitching, don't get me wrong, they could use another number 1, 2, 3 type starter in that rotation. So they could use somebody like a Chris Bassett. Since the Giants are still looking for outfield help, what do you think about them going after Andrew Benintendi? I saw an article about them being interested in him. I imagine the Brian Reynolds is probably a better fit at this point, especially defensively. I just wonder on the free agent market if there's ever really going to be an option that they like that's left out there. I mean, Mitch Haniger was probably the best option outside of Brennan Nimmo. I mean, right now you're looking at Michael Conforto and Andrew Benintendi as top of the outfield market. I think you could get a better one via trade. I know the Cardinals could possibly trade one out of there. But again, the Giants, they've got a couple of good corner outfielders now. Jock Peterson's going to handle mostly righties. They're going to need to platoon him, though, against lefties. They have Yastrzemski out there as well. Haniger probably takes over in right since Judge didn't go there. So they could use an outfielder, but sounds like they're most interested in bringing in Carlos Correa right now. They're going to have stiff competition, though, between the Minnesota Twins, Chicago Cubs, and we'll see where he ends up going. Do you think Correa will end up on the Yankees? I do not. I think Correa is probably going to end up in San Francisco just because they have to do something to make the fans not completely revolt against them. I mean, it's the San Francisco Giants. They're a very well-run organization. They did kind of set themselves up for failure, though, with the Aaron Judge sweepstakes. They really got that fan base excited about the possibility of bringing in the number 1 overall free agent on the board, quite possibly the best free agent ever to hit the market. And things just didn't work out. And there was always the possibility that it would go back to New York. The tweet from John Heyman didn't exactly help things either. And they need to make some type of a move to make that team a lot better. And bringing in Carlos Correa to play short, moving Brendan Crawford over to third, probably is what will end up happening for Carlos Correa. Also, who except Adam Ottavino is the best reliever on the market right now? Lefty reliever, I would probably go with Matt Moore. I know he's an older pitcher at this point in his career, but he was lights out last year. He was really dominant. I don't think it's going to cost a lot to bring him either. Ottavino, you mentioned. Taylor Rogers is still out there. Corey Knebel. If I had to pick between those, I'd probably choose Knebel. And if I wanted to choose an injury guy, Zach Britton. I just think there's a lot left in that tank, especially if he comes back healthy. You might not be able to pitch him much in the beginning of the year as he kind of rehabs, etc. But maybe in the second half of the year, especially down the stretch run in the playoffs, he could be a difference maker type of arm for you. It's kind of like a trade deadline acquisition as he ramps up his work in the first half of the season. They may, or whatever team ends up signing him, may limit his innings because of that injury. But I think Britton is one of the best pitchers pound for pound out of that bullpen. Why not Bassett in St. Louis? I just don't think they're going to go out there and make that level of commitment for a 34-year-old pitcher. They do have 6 starters, quote-unquote, but 2 of them are expected to be free agents after the year. Could they go out there and make a trade for one? Absolutely. But I think it's going to be more of a younger type option. I think if they're going to go, the trade route, Pablo Lopez makes a lot of sense. They've actually been connected to him before. Dodgers have been interested in him in the past. The Blue Jays have been interested in the past. Yankees absolutely need to bring in some starting pitching. He would be the guy I would want to bring in if I were the Yankees as far as a trade. But as far as to the Chris Bassett specific question, I think there's going to be better offers for him on the market from probably the Padres and the Mets, where I think it gets a little too uncomfortable for the Cardinals to stay in it. I figured Jock would mostly DH. I think Jock would DH if they had brought in Aaron Judge. I think they would have played Haniger in left, Judge in right, Yaz in center. That's something like that is what your defense would have ultimately aligned for you guys out in San Francisco. Since Judge isn't going there anyway, I think Peterson probably plays 120 games in the field and maybe another 40 at DH, something like that. Maybe a little bit less because of the platoons, etc. But you're going to have to take him out as a late game substitution anyway. You're not going to be able to play him all the time against lefties. And when a big lefty comes in out of the bullpen, well, he is a big, a really good slugger. He's not exactly as successful against lefties. We'll see what ends up happening there with the Giants. But they are still looking for an outfielder. Maybe they bring in a Brian Reynolds, and he strictly does DH. But as of right now, I think he's probably your majority of the time left fielder, if you will. The other 150 at bats out there is probably going to go to a right-handed hitter. Anthony, some are free agents next year. Yeah. Carlos Rodon news yet? Not yet. Only news out there is really that the Yankees are still trying to get things done. They've been basically hemming and hawing over how many years they exactly want to give him. It sounds like the AAV is pretty much set from what we've read in all the articles out there, but the term is what seems to be the sticking point. Rodon, it sounds like, wants a 7th year out of it. We entered this offseason with him expected to get probably in the neighborhood of a 5-year contract, maybe 6. Now the market is up to 7, and he is the last great pitching option on the market. So he's just waiting and biding his time, and that's what I would do. That's what I would do if I was in his shoes. I don't like Hudson on my cards. Well, until you move him, he's going to be there. Do you think Reynolds stay? Or do you think they'll trade Reynolds, or that he'll stay with the Pirates? I think they'll end up trading him. I know there's some people out there like Harold Reynolds on MLB Network that say, hey, they should go ahead and just keep him. I mean, just because you request a trade doesn't mean we have to. Well, you don't exactly want him being around and being a disgruntled worker, especially when you're calling up your top level prospects anyway. This is supposed to be the beginning of your next contention window at the end of this coming season, as kind of the post-trade deadline call-ups, the September call-ups. That's when you're going to see some growth out of the Pittsburgh Pirates organization. Then in 2024, you're going to see another wave come in, and things are really going to start turning fast for the Pirates. That's why they brought in 1-year contracts for Carlos Santana. They were trying to get something done for Kyle Gibson. Those would have been very nice pieces there. Do you think Bader trade is still holding up fair for both sides? No, absolutely not. I absolutely love the trade for the St. Louis Cardinals. They should have kept him in New York. They should have trusted his pitching repertoire in New York. They didn't do that. He's a significantly better pitcher in St. Louis, and I think that one's fairly lopsided in my opinion. Bader's a nice piece, but again, 1 or 2 games in the playoffs. Yes, it is the playoffs, but that's not expected performance for Bader. For Jordan Montgomery, anyway, he really showed something, another level in his performance at the after the trade deadline, and really kind of stuck it to the Yankees in several interviews after that trade deadline. How they repeatedly wouldn't let him throw the repertoire that he had. Mike Maddox, the pitching coach for the Cardinals then last year, now for the Texas Rangers this year, trusted him with his stuff, and he was lights out for the Cardinals. He was a big part of the reason why they made the run, overcame the Brewers in that division, kind of ran away with that division. And I would say the Cardinals easily won that trade. To answer your question, Bryce, yes, I can see your messages. Bader shined in the playoffs. Yes, he did. But again, I would still like the Cardinals side of it. Yankees need to reassess how they're handling their pitching staff. Not necessarily that everything wasn't bad and not everything was great, but I think they could have done better by Jordan Montgomery just by, looking at the pitches he was trying to throw and understanding what Jordan Montgomery wanted to use, the pitch sequencing he wanted to go with, the pitch usage he wanted to use. That was the biggest difference between his time in New York and his time in St. Louis anyway. Was his pitching repertoire was different. The pitch usage was different as well. I can't remember the pitch, but with the Yankees, I can't remember the pitch. I want to say it was the split, but it might have been something else. He was only allowed to throw it like 1% of the time in New York, and it was up over 25% in St. Louis. Just a big difference there. Welcome back, Kenny. Buddy just got on here. I missed the question about you. Think that Correa has a shot to be on the Yankees. I don't think he has a shot to be on the Yankees at this point. I think they're focusing on starting pitching. If they do spend money at the level of a Correa, it's going to be for a Carlos Rodon. Now, if they don't bring in Rodon, they could spend money elsewhere, bringing him in via trade or bringing in pitching via trade, but they're not going to invest in a Carlos Correa. I mean, I think they're going to try to keep their powder dry a little bit to try to entertain the possibility of Shohei Ohtani next offseason or Rafael Devers. Those are the pieces I think they're going to try to bring in next offseason, but they're not going to mess all that up by bringing in Carlos Correa, especially when they have Volpe already locked in to probably spend significant time as your shortstop for the Yanks next season. But I know we got about 25, 30 of you guys in here right now. Make sure you say hello, drop us a like, and hit that subscribe button. It really does help us out. Most likely Giants, yes, is what I was saying, Anthony. I heard from Cal Ripken Jr.'s brother that Eovaldi from Boston, good option for the Angels. Yes, he is. The Angels do need some starting pitching still. They still need to get a little bit more thump in that lineup. That's why catching would be one spot where they could bring in, a power hitter. That Angels lineup is going to need some improvement, especially when you consider that they haven't made the postseason in how many years now? And Ohtani's going to be a free agent after this year. Now, if the ownership group gets in there before opening day and the season isn't going as well as they had hoped, I think then is when you're going to see, some real offers come out of the woodwork for Shohei Ohtani. And at that point, that's when I would trade Shohei Ohtani. But they're not going to move him before the season. Again, I probably would have traded him 2 years ago. But It's not looking good if you're an Angels fan. But bringing in Eovaldi, just trying to make things work, see if you can push for that last wild card. Probably your best option to keep Ohtani at this point. What shortstop options do the Dodgers have? Well, it sounds like Gavin Lux could very well be the starting shortstop for the Dodgers if they don't get a deal done for Swanson or Correa. Now, it sounds like Mookie Betts still wants to play second base. We'll see if he ends up playing there. But they did sign Jason Hayward Jr. anyway to a minor league deal. Former teammate Freddie Freeman with the Atlanta Braves tweeting out that he's very excited to have him in LA. And if anybody can fix that swing, the LA Dodgers have a track record of fixing broken swings and improving, the batter's eye and those kinds of things. Look at Max Muncy. He's very proficient, very good as far as reading the zone. Might not give you everything you want as far as batting average, etc., but his on-base percentage is higher because of the work the Dodgers have done to make him a much better hitter. So looking at Jason Hayward, maybe they can find something, tweak that approach just a little bit, and they could at least have a platoon player for next season. That's what the Dodgers like to do when they're not spending at the top of the market, is go with those platoons, and we'll see if they end up getting something to work. But thank you guys for joining us. Really appreciate all the support that you guys have given us over the past couple of weeks. We finally crossed the 1,000 subscriber threshold. We're well on our way. See if we can get as high as we can before Christmas and before the end of the year. And a lot of news became official today as far as signings that we already knew about. Andrew Heaney's 2-year deal with the Texas Rangers is official. He does have an opt-out after the first year, should he choose to exercise it. $12 million guaranteed the first year, $13 million guaranteed the second year. If he opts out, however, he doesn't get that $13 million, but he does get a $500,000 buyout, which means the minimum guarantee on this is going to be $12.5 million. Now, there is incentives that could that ratchet that deal up to $37 million. If the numbers are to be believed from the LA Dodgers and he gets the innings, we could really see some improvement there. Welcome back, Anthony. Really appreciate you coming back and see us. But I know we got a few people in here that are newer to the Upside. Make sure you drop us a like and hit that subscribe. But thank you guys for all the questions so far. In case you guys are wondering, one site that you guys can use would really help us out, that would help you guys out anyway, is to kind of keep up with information if I'm working and I'm not able to post something. You guys can check out MLBTradeRumors.com. I'll try to keep you guys updated with our daily updates during the week as far as what's going on with the hot stove. But welcome back, Paul. Thanks, Paul. 28 watching, hook him up with a like, guys. Thank you. Really appreciate that when you guys say those things in there. Where do you think Fernando Tatis ends up getting traded with them signing Xander Bogaerts to that massive contract? I'm not sure he ends up getting traded still. I still think the trade possibility for him is below 1%. I think a team that's going to miss out on a shortstop, say the Giants end up losing out on getting the shortstop, and he ends up going to the Cubs. It'd be very rare to see an interdivision rival take a very high-end player like Fernando Tatis Jr. off their hands, but maybe the Giants would be desperate to stop all the clamoring of the fans calling for their heads after losing Aaron Judge to the Yanks, losing Carlos Correa, and all this hoopla about them cutting payroll and spending money this offseason, and they haven't brought in Jack. I mean, they brought in Mitch Haniger. He's a good piece, but he's not what that fan base had in mind as far as spending this offseason, and maybe they go that route. Now, say Correa ends up in San Francisco, then maybe the the Cubs anyway, turn to the San Diego Padres and make a call about Tatis Jr. But again, I'm not expecting a trade. I just think that he's one of the few superstars out there right now that if you made a call to that GM, he would at least pick up the phone and hear you out. You'd still have to overwhelm him with an offer. They're not just going to give him away, and it's going to cost you a pretty penny to get it done, but we'll see if anything ends up happening. Not saying it's completely out of the realm of possibility. I'm just saying I still don't expect it because I think they're trying to build as big of a super team as they can to try to overtake the Dodgers finally. And with the Dodgers struggling to bring in talent, trying to save their money for Shohei Ohtani next offseason as they try to warm up for that pursuit, leaves a lot of room in that division. A one-year opportunity here, if you will. That's why bringing in Xander Bogaerts, spending that money, keeping that rotation together, possibly adding another rotation piece to it, and locking up their release pitchers like Suarez, like Martinez. The Padres are going to be very good next year. Come on, guys. There's so many of you here. Love this channel, or you wouldn't be here. Go back. Leave a like. It's so simple, and then hit back to the chat. You'll be right back in. Leave a like. Thank you, Kenny. Really appreciate that. Really nice of you. Is there a possibility that the Marlins might end up trading both Luzardo and Lopez in the same trade? Same trade, no. They're not going to minimize the value in those trades by combining both pieces. Now, could it be a three-team trade? Sure, with one piece going somewhere and another piece going another place. Sure, but I think if there were to trade both of them, let's say just for argument's sake that Marlins put a stamp on it, we have to trade Lopez and Luzardo this offseason. They want to maximize the value for each, which means keeping them separate. If you put them in the same trade, sure you might get a better piece at the very top of that trade, but I think you can maximize the impact of the trade by keeping them separate. If the Angels are having a great season, I'm hearing they will offer $500 million or so for Ohtani. What do you think? That's what I think he's going to ultimately end up signing for next offseason. So for those of you wondering, hey, could my team sign Shohei Ohtani next season? Do you got $50 million to spend on him? Then you have a chance. I think he's going to want to go somewhere where he has an absolute guaranteed playoff chance next season. That I do not think is going to be something that you can say in LA with the LA Angels. The LA Dodgers, on the other hand, guaranteed to be in a playoff spot, I believe, next season, especially if they bring in Shohei Ohtani. Now, don't get me wrong. There are still holes on a lot of the teams out there, and those teams that would have money to spend on Shohei are going to have holes after they sign him as well, because that's $50 million. Maybe the Mets even make a play out if Cohen is really going to be, Mr. Crazy Man and go $400 million in payroll, literally doubling what most of the contracts are out there. We'll see what ends up happening, but the Yankees are going to expect it to have some money out there. But I believe the Dodgers are ultimately going to be the team that he goes to at that point. Question about contracts. Is it more common in baseball for you to see front-loaded contracts or back-loaded contracts like you see in football? Honestly, it's a mixed bag. Most contracts that you see out there get a little bit bigger as the years go along. Because teams like to save a little bit of money for that offseason to try to tinker with their roster a little bit. Very rarely do you see front-loaded contracts as far as putting like $30 million on 1 year and by the end of the deal it's down at 15. It's very rare to see that dramatic of a shift. The majority of contracts though are like 3 years for $16 million average annual value, and every single year is going to be $16 million each year. But most of the time you see the contracts get a little bit bigger if they don't follow that method anyway. Welcome back, Clay. It's been a minute since I've seen you in our chat. Appreciate you coming back. Welcome back, Michael. Correa to New York. I don't think that's happening, unfortunately. Is Ohtani going to be a part of the trade deadline again this next season? I believe he will be at this point, just because if they get the ownership piece done by opening day, maybe ownership tries to bring him in, spending all that money, etc., for the franchise. They don't want to lose value in that team right away. But there's no way you trade him before the season. I still think he hits free agency. I don't think he'll ultimately get traded, but I think there'll be a lot of conversation about it. But he will be a free agent after the year. But to answer your question, Correa to New York, no. It sounds like the Giants, Cubs, and Twins are most likely for him. This is an interesting question. Why does it seem like the Marlins and Rays, being that they're so close to Puerto Rico, Cuba, and Dominican Republic, don't have a strong scouting department there? Teams really haven't invested in the international departments as well as other teams have, I'll put it that way. Plus, you have name recognition that's really, a driving force in a lot of those international prospects, which is why Major League Baseball, wants to make it safe for the players. That's their biggest priority, is just safety of the players. There are some very scary stories out there about what happens to these international prospects as they try to make it over to the States, whether it's, the wet foot, dry foot question, whether it's them sneaking off their own island, whatever the case may be, sneaking away from, the security or military details of their home countries. There's some really scary things that happen to them. Coyotes that try to bring them in, holding them, all those kinds of things. Lots of scary things happen. And just trying to make it more of a streamlined process with an international draft makes things so much safer for the player. Now, as far as the team side of it, the name recognition of, say, like the New York Yankees or LA Dodgers, even if they have a good scouting department internationally, it certainly helps to have that cachet of your name when you're trying to sign the player. For instance, if you're a 16-year-old kid and you want to have the brightest future in the world, you're looking at the Miami Marlins or the LA Dodgers. Which team are you instantly going to be more gravitated towards, unless your favorite team is the Marlins? It's the LA Dodgers, and it's not close. And so that's why we see a little bit of disparity as far as talent. Now, sure, you can try to outbid the other teams. That's, of course, very common for like the Cincinnati Reds. Some years will try to, really land one of the top 3 or 4 guys, but they have to give almost every single bit of their pool to be able to do it. And that's another way you can that way you can go about it. But the international draft is going to solve so many issues for baseball. I cannot wait to see how they end up unfolding, or how that ends up unfolding. The opposite way, why does it seem West Coast teams don't have a strong scouting department like in Asia, where they can dominate that sector for baseball players? There's a Pacific Ocean that's a pretty big place, um, and yes, while they're closer to the Pacific Rim, I'll put it that way. I don't think there's going to be any real advantage for the West Coast teams aside from them, having connected or not having to work with a connecting flight to get them back to their home country. Outside of that, I mean, the scouting departments really don't have that much of a difference between their effectiveness internationally towards Asia versus, say, like the Cleveland Guardians or the Texas Rangers, who aren't on the West Coast, that have very similar type of international scouting for that region of the world. Can you answer my question from above real quick? I don't see one. Let me see. And what he has heard? That's the last thing I see from you, Bryce. Go ahead and put your comment or your question real quick in there again, because I'm wondering if it popped up in there. Let me see. Let me switch my chat around real quick and see if it'll pop up that way. I wonder if it filtered it. Okay, there it is. I see it. Yankees are rumored to be doing something real big per Buster Olney, and he mentioned Carlos Correa. He also mentioned Carlos Rodon in that. I think that's really the piece that's going to go to the Yankees at some point. Welcome back, Sub-Zero. Carlos Rodon news yet? Not yet. Still sounds like it's going to be, the Yankees or a couple other teams that are still in the mix. But it sounds like whoever ends up going to that 7th year at around a $30 million AAV is who will end up getting him. Might be a little bit less in order to get that 7th year. Might be able to drop that AAV down to like 29, 28. But I think that's best case scenario for who ends up getting him. See if there's any other notes. Do you think the prices are going to start ballooning up in terms of pitching on the trade market once Carlos Rodon signs? Yes, but I think the price is already pretty steep. I mean, there's not a whole lot of starting pitching, not a lot of good starting pitching on the market. I mean, the Mariners are said to have a number 5 option out there, Chris Flexen or Marco Gonzalez. You got Pablo Lopez, maybe Luzardo from the Marlins, maybe a Shane Bieber type from the Cleveland Guardians. Then you turn towards the Milwaukee Brewers guys, and those guys are going to cost a significant penny. I mean, even Brendan Woodruff, who's not nearly as high quality of a pitcher as Corbin Burns, is still going to command at least a top 100 prospect, maybe 2. And the price is going to be quite steep to be able to trade for starting pitching. Now, could you go out there and maybe take a contract off of somebody's hands like we discussed last night? Say the Brewers are trying to be able to re-sign all 3 pieces, Burns, Adames, and Woodruff. By the summer of 2024 or winter of 2024 is when they're going to be free agents. Maybe you eat the contract a little bit of a Christian Yelich and are able to acquire one of those pieces to guarantee that they have the money to retain a guy like Willy Adames and Corbin Burns at the top, and maybe that's your way of snaking away a guy like Brandon Woodruff out of the deal. But the trade prices right now for starting pitching are very high, and the options on the trade market are very slim. We're not seeing a whole lot of the big names out there like we usually do every offseason. In fact, at the winter meetings, we didn't see any real big trades at all, which, again, we're going to see some of those at some point, don't get me wrong, but the market has been very slow to develop because they've been waiting for this market to unclog with the likes of Aaron Judge and Justin Verlander and DeGrom, etc. Those guys are starting to get out of the way. Rodon is the last big piece on the board outside of Senga, depending on what you think about him. And then you're down to that next tier with Chris Bassett and those type of pitchers. Do you think the Dodgers have an injury-prone starting pitching? They depend on their pitching. What do you think? I was actually looking up the free agent class of next offseason. Julio Urias is going to be a free agent, I believe. They, of course, have injury issues all over that rotation. Kershaw's getting older. We'll see if he's found new life with a different way of pitching. I think he has, and you might be able to keep him for another couple of years around. But Walker Buehler, of course, is going to miss some time. Dustin May has missed some time. They need to get some more options in that starting staff. They had injury issues last year with the guys they did bring in. Andrew Heaney, even though he found another level, only pitched 72 innings. He's also gone. Max Scherzer no longer there. Bauer's on the suspended, etc. list. He's not expected to make an impact at all. And then that the depth that usually we've seen with the Dodgers in years past, when those injury issues have perked out, they could skip a start and keep them healthier in the long run. Those kinds of things. That's not really an option right now for this Dodgers team. They need to lengthen out that starting rotation, put some long relief guys in there who can start or make a spot start here and there for guys who need a skip their turn in the rotation. Say, Kershaw has tightness in his arm. Well, right now they don't really have the depth to be able to fill that spot. So they were interested in bringing in Justin Verlander to kind of have that peak performance guy in that rotation. But I think they're going to go more of a quantity approach as far as the back end of the starting rotation. You hear the Mets are trying to get Correa. I've heard the Mets pretty much being linked to everybody this offseason, just because Cohen is the guy that's willing to spend the money. Now, of course, they could bring him in to play, third base. I don't think that's a real option, though, Victor. I think that's more wishful thinking for Mets fans. I think the market out there is very strong for him. He should be able to play his natural position of shortstop. And while the Mets would love to have him, I'm sure, they don't really have an option for him to play at short. They have Lindor there. They're not going to move him off. And so I think they're going to spend their money on that starting pitching, maybe at DH, and of course continue to round out that bullpen. Every time I watch Corbin Burns pitch, he reminds me a little bit of Curt Schilling. He does kind of me as well. Mark Pryor, not so much, but he reminds me a lot as far as physically of a Curt Schilling, just the way he's able to dominate games. Remember, Corbin Burns was a reliever out of the bullpen when he first came up with the Brewers. He's only really been starting for 2+ years, and he's been very effective. He's won a Cy Young doing it. He's got 2 years left on his contract, so he's got a lot of bullets left in that arm. But I'm just very curious to see if the Brewers are not able to negotiate a long-term deal with him. Is he the odd man out? If they're unable to move off of the contract of Yelich, do they try to move off a guy like Willy Adames? But the Brewers have a lot of questions to answer, and them telling us that trading Colton Wong is the answer to all their prayers this offseason, I'm not buying it. Do you think the Cubs will sign one of the 2 final shortstops? If so, which one? Good question. There was a little bit of news out of the Atlanta Braves concerning one of those shortstops, Dansby Swanson. They haven't had a whole lot of communication with him. I imagine they're letting Dansby Swanson go out there and try to earn his best contract that he possibly can out there. And that's kind of what I see happening, is that if they're unable to get a contract worked out with the Atlanta Braves, I think the Cubs are very likely to bring him in. Dodgers could bring him in to solve the shortstop problem on the cheap. Probably a contract in the neighborhood of $22 to $25 million for a 6-year term. Probably gets it done for Dansby Swanson. Cubs, I think they have to get one of the shortstop at some point. There's nobody really on the free agent market over the next couple of years that's going to really be an impact outside of a guy like Tim Anderson. So kind of keep your eyes peeled for what happens with the Cubs. But their best option is to move Nico Hoerner over to second base, where he's a little bit more comfortable, a little bit better defensively, and bring in Dansby Swanson would be a great option, the best shortstop defensively on the market. Correa's not bad either, but a lot more offense in that bat. But do I think they'll end up getting one? I'd say probably, if I had to put an odds on it right now, I'd probably say like 51% they do, 49% they don't. Rays in the offseason, early in the offseason, Angels were interested in one of their young starting pitching. What have you heard? Not sure what you're talking about there, Andres. The Rays were interested in bringing in young starting pitching, or the Rays were interested in bringing in one of the Angels' young starting pitching. Not sure what you're trying to get at there. Probably the Yanks get him. I don't know about the Yanks getting him. I think Carlos Rodon's probably the big piece there. I'm not sure if you agree with this comparison. Also, Sandy Alcantara reminds me of either Vida Blue or Bob Gibson. Neither, honestly. Sandy Alcantara is a very different pitcher, in my opinion, than a lot of starters that we've seen. Very quiet, goes about his business a little differently. He looks a little lanky on the mound as well. I'm not really sure there's an equal match for him. I know they're very different pitchers, but Chris Sale, as far as the lankiness, physically that reminds me of him, but they're two very different pitchers. Couldn't be more different as far as how they actually threw the ball. But as far as the way he stands on that mound, you got a little bit of Randy Johnson with his height, but I don't think there's really an accurate comparison out there for Alcantara. If Dansby Swanson doesn't go back to the Braves, it's either Dodgers or White Sox. White Sox, no. Cubs, yes. Dodgers or Cubs if he leaves the Braves. But we saw a whole bunch of deals also get finalized today. I mentioned the Andrew Heaney one earlier. David Robertson, 1 year, $10 million. He is his own agent and was able to get a very lucrative deal off of a nice year with the Cubs and Phillies last year, pitching in the World Series once again when many thought his career was over coming into the 21 season. And a very nice way to rebound his career. He's done fantastic. The slider that he throws. I don't follow the Marlins that closely. I haven't seen too many games where he pitches yet. We did actually cover one of them live here on YouTube. You can actually go back and check out that game, but I don't remember the slider itself. Tough to say. Swanson is definitely the best defensive shortstop on the market. Defensively, I mean, there's very rarely a play that he doesn't make. The defense for Swanson is his calling card. I think the bat for Correa, combined with elite defense, makes Correa obviously the better shortstop between the two. But if I'm, looking for one of those two shortstops, I would prefer Carlos Correa. The Angels were into the Rays' young starting pitching. Okay. Well, Angels need some starting pitching. Period. I mean, the Rays have a ton of a ton of prospects that they're trying to keep around their roster. They had to make a lot of deals to kind of solve their Rule 5 issues before the Rule 5 eligibility deadline back in November. I think if the Angels were able to make a trade back then for one of those pieces, they should have gone about it that way. Let me pull up Dansby real quick. Batting, I don't want batting, I want defense. That's still batting. There we go, fielding. I want to say he was like 21 outs above average, something like that is what Dansby Swanson was last year. It was 21 DRS or 21 outs above average. I can't remember what the number was. It's been a while since I looked. Got the Gold Glove last year in Atlanta. Fielding percentage, 986. I don't see the number I'm looking for on this one. Let me check Carlos for you. .983, very similar in defensive numbers as far as fielding percentage. I still don't see the number I'm looking for, though. Either way, both are very good, proficient defensively. Neither one of them is going to be horrific anyway. In terms of Hall of Fame, after Fred McGriff, do you ever think they're going to induct elite pitching coaches or hitting coaches into the Hall of Fame? Very, very doubtful they'll do that. I mean, at some point, I'd imagine they'll at least have some honorable mention type of a thing, but I don't think they'll really do, hitting coaches or pitching coaches. Usually it's the managers that get the credit for those types of hires because, again, the manager's going to have an impact on every single aspect of their team, pitching, hitting, all of it. 70 career defensive run save versus 16. Dansby has improved, but Correa has a better resume. I'll agree with that one. But as I'm saying, Dansby is more of a defense-first type player, whereas Correa is a better all-around player. But neither one of them is going to leave you hanging defensively at this point in their career. What position in the infield, in your honest opinion, relies the most on the DRS stat? Shortstop, third base, second base, first, or catcher? Good question. The numbers for first, as far as defensive numbers for first base, are very difficult for me to understand how those exactly work, especially with DRS, or when DRS is considered. Go ahead and take them out. Third base, it's fairly accurate, I would have to say. Shortstop, it can be hit or miss. I mean, some years you can have a guy like Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, just because he doesn't make an error, make him look a whole lot better than he actually is. But I would probably say third or short. Second base, you can hide a bat there at second base over the years. We've seen that with Jeff Kent. They tried to do it in Cincinnati with Mike Moustakas. Sometimes you can put a really good hitter at second base and get away with it, whereas I think at shortstop and third base, you need a little bit better fielder than that. Outs above average isn't the prime metric for infielders. They adapted it only 2 years plus ago. Even admit that it has less predictive power. I agree. I love me some Correa. I wish the Rangers had signed him over Seager. I still would rather have had Corey Seager, honestly. I get how, Correa's right there, though. I just think over the long term of their contracts, I think Seager's going to be the better option for them. Correa's more of a divisive figure, at least in sports. Just look at how the LA Dodgers are steering clear for the most part of the Carlos Correa sweepstakes, just because of their belief that he had an impact in Houston as far as the sign stealing scandal, etc. I don't really care one way or the other as far as that goes. To me, that was more of an organizational failing. That's why you saw the manager get suspended, the GM get suspended. The players didn't really get any blame as far as for Major League Baseball. They just said yes, they were there, they took part of it, they benefited from it, and those careers, while they're going to have not necessarily be tainted because of it, they're going to have that as a point of clarification. I'll put it that way. It's not necessarily the asterisk that PEDs were for them. But welcome back, Jessica. Appreciate you coming back. What do you think will be the new, or who do you think will be the new owner of the Angels? No clue. Ownership is very tricky as to seeing who ends up getting them, especially in baseball. We've seen them reject really good candidates for ownership in the past. Mark Cuban, I thought, should have already been a owner in Major League Baseball. He was in there for the Chicago Cubs deal. He was in there for the Pittsburgh Pirates years ago, and they just never got it done. And I think he'll be a fantastic owner, but who ends up getting the ownership of the Angels, I have no clue. I even saw somebody mention Steve Ballmer as one of the candidates to bring him in. I mean, he already owns the Clippers. Maybe he just wants to have the LA teams there, but I have no idea. For you, when you're looking at voting for Gold Glover, Platinum Gloves, or for position players, which stat do you wish they used a lot more? Because I feel that DRS can be overrated. I think if you're relying strictly on DRS or outs above average, you're not doing yourself justice. You actually need to watch the players play. If you are one of the voters for those types of things, I think you need to be focusing a lot more on each player specifically, especially at the very top. Those things have big impacts as far as contractual things, especially during arbitration. If a player is younger, for instance, like Nathaniel Lowe, he won the Silver Slugger for the Texas Rangers, really came on in the second half of the year. Offensive stats are a lot easier to just go by the numbers, but defensively, you actually need to watch the game and see their range, see how big of a range they have, those kinds of things. Hunter Brown is going to be the next best starting pitcher next season for the Houston Astros. I'll put it this way. Verlander isn't there anymore. They're going to have to rely on their young starting pitching. McCullers is probably the oldest pitcher left in that staff. They're going to have some issues at some point. I think they've got some good prospects still coming. I don't think they've dried up the well yet, but saying he's going to be better than Valdez, than Javier, than Urquidy even at this point, I'm not really sure if that's going to end up being the case. Definitely understand the LA Dodgers stepping away, but other teams don't have the same history. True, but there's a lot. It's not just the Dodgers that are going to bring that up in the interviews with Correa. I agree, though. Cuban would have been a great owner in baseball. I'm more than a little irked as a Mavericks fan that he didn't get an ownership in baseball. Just looking how he takes care of his players for his basketball team, there is no better owner in professional sports that takes care of his players. I know there are some other owners that are fantastic, but if you guys want to read up on the story of Delonte West, I know you guys, we're talking about baseball right now, but you guys might have heard of a guy named LeBron James. Back when he was with the Cleveland Cavaliers, there was a player on his team named Delonte West. There was a little bit of drama about him and LeBron's mom and all that kind of stuff. A lot of drinking and all that kind of thing. Ended his career essentially with the Dallas Mavericks. A lot of alcohol abuse, that kind of a thing, and things were just over and over repeated problems for him. Mark Cuban didn't just stick by him his first time he went to rehab. He didn't just stick by him the second time he went to rehab. All the legal troubles that he had, Mark Cuban was there to help pick him up and put him back on his feet and try to get him back on the right path. He is a fantastic owner off the court. He is out of this world, takes care of his people. as far as like taking care of the facilities, if you look at the Dallas Mavericks arena, that thing is a thing of beauty still. What, 20 years after it's built? Player locker rooms are fantastic. Even the visiting locker rooms, which usually they try to make them crappy and say, we're going to make it tougher on you by having, worse accommodations than the home team. Mark Cuban still takes care of every single one of his pieces. He takes a lot of pride in that, and he's a great owner. As far as making the commitment, going with loyalty, he's certainly done that over the last 10 years. He went out there and made big moves to try to improve the roster with Dirk over the first 10 years of his career, and then went the loyalty route the final 10. He does everything you could ask for as an owner, and he should already have been an owner in Major League Baseball. Mickey Arison, isn't he already the owner? The sport overall needs more personality on the field and off. I agree. You use a blend of metrics over a longer sample than a full season. I agree. DRS and UZR Ultimate Zone Rating, for those of you who are unsure what UZR is a pretty solid combo. I would agree. I actually do really like UZR as a stat overall. Andres Lopez. Series Angels versus Twins. Correa's sister was an Ohtani fan. People made a thing of when both players took a pic with Correa's sister. I don't remember that, actually. I do follow the Twins occasionally, but I do not remember that at all. I kind of wish when we analyzed the defensive side of the ball in baseball, they had something similar to OPS plus stat. Defense, though, is very difficult for those types of things. I mean, it's just not the same. I mean, you can clearly see when somebody gets a base hit. You can clearly see when somebody makes an error defensively. You can clearly see when somebody hits a home run, but you can't really see things like, could they have really, dove for that ball and gotten it, or is it really going to go into left field? Could the shortstop have really stopped the ball from going down the line? Those types of things. Third baseman, could he have stopped it from going down the line and hold the hitter to a single as opposed to just watching it go by and get a double? Those are very difficult things to quantify defensively. UZR does a great job as far as trying to identify zone rating, sprint speed, those types of things to take into account. Could they have reached the ball in time? How hard was the ball hit off the bat? Barrel percentage, that kind of impacts those kinds of things. Velocity of the ball. There's a lot of things that go into the defensive side of it. And offensively, just looking at pure numbers, RBIs driven in, home runs, those types of things are a lot easier to quantify. Senga to the Padres. Welcome back, Cobra. I think that's a very real possibility. I think the Padres and Mets right now are by far the best two options. You think Mickey Arison would be a great owner for a baseball team? Maybe if the Marlins go up for sale again, he knows how to make a successful team in South Florida? Possibly. That's how I know his name. Miami Heat. Never mind. But appreciate you guys joining us. Got 37 of you guys in here right now. Make sure you hit that like button. It really does help us out. Doing our daily live with you guys tomorrow. We'll be making some short videos for you guys to check out. Now that we have actually crossed over that 1,000 subscriber platform, we're going to make a slight change to the way that we do things here at the Upside. I know we put out a lot of information in short content form anyway, for those of you who get like shorts feeds and those kinds of things. We'll still be doing things in shorter videos, but we're going to add a little bit of time to them, get a little bit more in-depth with our information now that we're over the monetization platform. Officially became part of the YouTube partnership program officially today, so we're finally crossed that line. And hopefully we'll kind of continue on being strong here now that we've crossed that line and kind of build this channel up even more. But we'll have a little bit of a change for how we do those types of things for you guys. So like I said, tomorrow we'll be posting a couple of those videos, see what you guys think of them, give you guys some more in-depth information as far as what these contracts mean as far as players. Football, Baker Mayfield going there and leading the Rams to a victory with down by 13 points in the final 4 minutes of the game. A lot of more content for what you guys are wanting to know about. So make sure you drop us a like, hit that subscribe button. We'll keep you guys updated on everything we possibly can. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that. It's been a long, long, long road to get here. Started this thing November 27th last year. Crossed the 1,000 subscriber platform, I think Sunday this week. They said on some of their platforms that you can expect to take between a week to a month to actually get authorized. And here we are 5 days later, everything's approved. We're good to go, and it's been a lot of fun. I just wanted to say thank you to a lot of you guys that have been watching for a long time. I know we started this thing a long time ago now, and you guys have been really sticking with us pretty much since around probably the beginning of the baseball season when we really started to gain some momentum. Was when we really gained from like 300 subscribers, all the way up to like 500. Trade deadline got us up to 6 and 7, and then the NFL trade line got us up to 9, and then we finally, with the winter meetings, got over the 1,000. So I just wanted to say, those of you who've been around with us for a long time, thank you guys for making this possible, and really excited to see what this can do. I have a plan as far as making this my full-time job. I'm hoping to be able to do that sometime within the next year. Got to see how the monetization thing works. It's going to be brand new to me, so it'll be trial and error trying to make this thing work for you guys. But the more you guys like, the more you guys subscribe, the more people we get to join this community, the more I can do for you guys. I just want to say it's meant a lot to me to be able to get where I am right now. I have a friend who's been doing YouTube for 5 years, and he may actually be watching right now. I don't know if he is or not, but he's been working really hard trying to get his channel going, and he stepped away for a period of about 3 years and started to pick it back up again. That's when I was like, hey, I've thought about sports pretty much all my life. I wanted to be a GM of a sports team at some point. That was my ultimate goal. Never thought I was ultimately going to get there. Never thought I'd be a guy on ESPN. Just never thought I'd have the connections to do it. And he pushed me to start this channel, so I owe him a thank you for doing that. But it's been a lot of fun making this channel work, and just want to thank you guys for sticking around, hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe. Every single time you do that, it really does help. And thank you guys. Thank you. Gotta go. Love your info. Great job. Thank you, Andres. Bryce, this is what Michael K said on his show about what he's hearing about Rodon. They're in on Rodon, but then I hear there's something even bigger they're working on. Interesting. Interesting. Michael K usually does have very accurate information when it comes to the Yankees. I think that they're going to end up with Rodon, though. I just don't see them being able to bring in Correa and Rodon. Say for some reason they go ahead and blow Correa out of the water and give him 10 years at $325 million. They still have Volpe. They could go out there and trade for a number one starter with Volpe and a couple other prospects. I mean, he does have immense prospect value. But of course, the contracts are going to start getting a little bit exorbitant if they go that route. But I think their best route is to bring in Rodon and then trade for other starting pitching. But if it is Correa that is that other piece that they're working on, I'd have more questions about it than I would answers. I'll put it that way. When you analyze defensive metrics, do you kind of wish on the defensive side of the ball they had something similar to OPS Plus to the terminal elite defenders for each position? Sure, but there's really no way to quantify that. I mean, they try to do like slugging percentage, on the offensive side. There's no way to really do that on the defensive side. There's different ways to calculate defense. Is a player really, doing everything he possibly can at the position? How big of a range does he have compared to another player? Who's to say one player's range is bigger than another? Sure, you can do, you can test them out and do, measure it over a year and a half just to see how big of a chance they have at, stopping a ball, getting through to the outfield, those types of things. And then you have the same thing in the outfield. Sprint speed. Can they get to the ball fast enough? Hang time in the air. How hard was it hit off the bat? A lot of those things have to be taken into account. And they try their best, don't get me wrong. But a lot of those statistics are very, how do I put this in the right terms? Subjective, but that's not the right word either. They're just incomplete. The defensive numbers, the best way I can put it is that they're not complete. And until we get to that point, it's going to be very difficult to accurately say, defensively, one player, period, is better than another player, period. Outside of, like putting Daniel Vogelbach in center field, I think we all know he would not be a good center fielder for the Mets. It's very difficult to judge defense between very similar players at the same position. Or they can trade Donaldson and Hicks and free up 30 plus million. Sure, but again, they're going to have to attach heavy prospects to that. Say you want to free up money and you want to, send out Donaldson and Hicks. A team that has some money that's below the luxury tax obviously would have to take them on. I don't think they're going to end up anywhere else. The Yankees may end up having to eat a little bit of that money anyway, because I think the prospects that are going to be required to offload that level of money are going to be premium assets, and that's literally getting nothing back. So a team like, say the Texas Rangers, for instance, they signed Andrew Heaney. They've got roughly, 40 million plus that they can go until they hit the luxury tax, somewhere in there, maybe 30 million. Say you bring in Donaldson, that's 20 million right there. It's going to cost you premium assets in order to get him off of there. Probably a guy like Peraza. I mean, I've used this example before, but for $4 million of cap savings, or of salary savings anyway, for the Giants a few years back, this was a few years back, by the way, for $4 million in savings, it cost the Giants a top 15 or 20 prospect to offload $4 million on a 1-year contract. They also included, I want to say, one other piece in there, or a little bit of money. I can't remember, but essentially for $4 million in savings, it cost a top 20-ish top 20, top 15 prospect in Jason Barr to go to the Rangers. What do you think it's going to cost to save them $20 million in Donaldson? What do you think it's going to cost them to save all of the money and years left on Hicks's deal? If they could amnesty those contracts, I'm sure they would love to do that. If they could amnesty the contract for Stanton, they would love to do that. If they could amnesty the contract for DJ LeMahieu, they would do that. But it's going to cost them a pretty penny just to offload those salaries on another team. This is a general question about trade value. Is there a way you can maximize both players' value if you say trade them simultaneously in the same trade to the same team? If you're looking for a better prospect or a better trade overall, sure. Taking two B prospects and combining them into an A value. Sure, you could do that. But usually in baseball, the way it works, if you have a major league talent, say for what I'm sure you're asking here is Luzardo and Pablo Lopez. Who exactly are you trading those two pieces, which are probably at best a number 2 starter, and Luzardo at best right now a number 3 if he hits his potential numbers. Probably more of a number 4 though at this point. And as far as the value, you're not going to get back, an all-star level player at that point. I think you're going to get lots of pieces back rather than, one ginormous piece. That's why I think if you keep them separate, get the most pieces you can, get the best combination of pieces out of those two type of deals, is going to work a lot better for you, Anthony. When do you think we'll see moves this weekend? Well, I was hoping we'd see the Rodon signing possibly go down, but if Michael Kay is hearing something bigger happening with the Yankees, maybe that's what's holding up the market for Rodon. That, and of course the 7th year. See, that's why I asked about Correa when we first got on here, because Buster Olney was the one who said he was picking up big vibes about the Yankees speaking on Carlos Correa. Yeah, again, I just don't see them going after something like that. I think bringing in Correa gives the Yankees more questions than it does answers, which is why I think they're still going to ultimately end up with Carlos Rodon. As far as substantive talks anyway with Carlos Correa, we haven't really seen anything about those yet, as far as numbers being tossed around, those types of things. Maybe we'll see something out of nowhere like we did with Xander Bogaerts, 11 years, $280 million at 11 o'clock at night. Maybe we'll see something like that. But again, I just see them valuing pitching so much more that they're going to go that route. Is that what the player to be named later is basically offsetting the contractor trading away? No, player to be named later is usually for contracts who can't be moved, etc. Those types of things. Sorry. Anyway. Welcome back, Willard. How can MLB Network say Judge is in the same category as Jeter when he's not won any titles, plus people judge Bonds for steroids? But what about baseball's juicing the ball for the Yankees? Well, I don't think Judge and Jeter are in the same class. I think what they're saying is that they could view them eventually in the same class as far as being in Monument Park, that type of impact on the Yankees. Now, as far as winning championships, right now there's no comparison. I mean, Judge hasn't won a championship. Jeter's won all kinds of championships, consummate professional, probably one of the greatest Yankees in history. Now I'm all about pitching first, and I really want to see Rodon get signed, and I'm a big Michael Kay fan. He's always usually right. So I'm just going to leave it up to time and see what happens. I agree, Kenny. I mean, as far as the Yankees, I think their biggest need is still pitching. If they decide that the pitching price is way too high for them to go out there and bring in Carlos Rodon, I could see them going a different direction, but they're still going to add at least a couple of starters to that staff, whether it's Rodon, Senga, going to the lower end of the market with Waka and Miley and maybe trading for Pablo Lopez and then spending the money on Carlos Correa. I think they need to get a better starting pitcher than a number 3, 4 type starter. They need to bring in a number 2, somebody who can be an ace on that staff if Garrett Cole falters a little bit, because all the pressure last year was on Garrett Cole, was on Nestor Cortez, and we saw how it kind of faltered in the second half of the year. Their starters ERA was over 4.5 after June. That's what you said about Bogarts and the Padres. You never know. Exactly. I think it might be a big move for the Yanks tomorrow. We'll see. I mean, we have seen some big trades out of nowhere before. I thought we might see some really big ones if the Yankees lost out on Judge. Maybe the Yankees have another, an ace up their sleeve going forward. One more question I'm going to say, listener, any news on left field? Mostly interested in what they're going to do, try to trade for Brian Reynolds or what? It sounds like it's going to be Brian Reynolds or Benintendi. I think there's a better option out there at some point, probably on the trade market. Somebody we haven't been thinking of. I thought they would have been a great fit, Yoshida. I thought he probably would have gotten a 3 or 4 year deal for $45 million. Red Sox blew everybody else out of the water with that $90 million deal, well above what everybody else was offering according to rival GMs. And I thought he would have been a great fit for the Yankees. But they still have Bader there, Hicks, Stanton, Judge. They don't exactly have a free spot in their outfield, so I wonder if they're going to kind of wait on that outfield addition until they solve their bullpen, until they solve their starting rotation, if they bring in Correa or whoever else they decide to bring in. Before winter meetings, they were said to be interested in Wade Miley and Drew Smyly. Yes. Another day when the Jays don't do anything. Yep. That's kind of getting disappointing for Jays fans. What would you be willing to give up for Trevor Rogers? His trade value is 12.9 when I looked at the baseball trade value site. For which team? Which team, Anthony? Yoshida got way too much money. The Red Sox said they overpaid. Yes, they most certainly did. Red Sox, if I'm a Red Sox fan, I'm picketing until they get rid of Kyle Bloom at this point. He has proven to be incapable of managing a team in Boston. He's trying to run it too much like the Tampa Bay Rays, and I get that you're trying to, control your team. I get that the ownership has their eyes focused on their soccer team that they own in the English Premier League, I believe. I get all of that, but it's the Boston Red Sox. That fan base is absolutely deserving of a winning team. Not necessarily a championship team. I mean, there's only one champion every single year, but at least to have good product on the field. And right now, they're looking like the worst team by far in that division, and it's only getting worse every single year since he took over. The first thing he did was trade away Mookie Betts, and I understand that he had a lot of difficulty convincing Mookie Betts to say. It sounded like he may have wanted to leave in free agency. Now they're seeing Xander Bogaerts go, but it's up to you to reinvest in that team. The contracts that he has signed haven't worked out. The trades that he made hasn't really worked out. And at what point are the Red Sox faithful going to say enough is enough? Welcome in, Robert. Appreciate you joining us. Judge had no intentions of signing with the Giants. He used the Giants to get leverage on the Yankees. Judge went for every last penny from the Yankees. He didn't quite go for every last penny. I mean, look at the San Diego Padres. I think if he was serious about that and he had taken that offer back to the Yankees, I think he may have been able to get 10 years out of him. But I think there wasn't really interest in going to San Diego, and so that's why he said, hey, I really just want to be a Yankee, and that's why he took 9 at 40. Takes him to his age 40 season, don't get me wrong, but I think he still should have gotten, or he still could have gotten another year out of it and maybe an extra $1 million or $2 million in average annual value. That's why I speculated this offseason that, at $400 million contract over 10 years might make a lot of sense. Seems like that was going to be the offer on the table for the Padres. If the Yankees got up to that price, then I could have seen other teams, maybe the Giants, going even higher than that to try to bring him in. One more question. If the Yankees load up, would they be a super team? Are they going to be able to talk the talk and walk the walk? Like Ric Flair used to say, be the man, you got to beat the man. Well, as far as the Astros, they've had their number for years now. The Astros have won that division, or won the division in the AL West for years. They've been in the ALCS for the last 6 years. Every time they face the Yankees in the playoffs, they basically own them. As Pedro Martinez once said about the Yankees, that they're their daddy. Now at this point, I think the Yankees could say that the Astros are their daddy. Now if they load up, could they make it a little bit better? Could they get a little bit better situation? Sure. Do I think that they're going to be better than the Astros next year? Depends on what they do. If they bring in Rodon, I think they could be right there. If they bring in Lopez, again, they could be right there. But if they really want to go over the top, I think they're two significant pieces away from getting over the top of the Astros, because I think the Astros are still going to add a left fielder. I think they're still going to add one more piece in that bullpen, and they're going to be just as good as they were last year. Maybe a little bit less so because that division is more competitive. But we'll see how things go for the Yankees the rest of the offseason before we make a decision on that. Come on, Jays, get Reynolds. My opinion, I think the Jays need to make some type of a move, like for a Reynolds or a Benintendi, some type of left-handed hitting outfielder. So for the Rangers is who you're asking for, Anthony, a trade of Trevor Rogers to the Rangers. Let me pull him up real quick. Starting pitcher, 20-ish games, got blown up last year to a 5.47 ERA. At this point, if the Rangers were interested in him, they're looking more at him as a number 5 piece in that rotation. The strikeout numbers aren't good. The walk numbers aren't good. They're not exactly what the Rangers are looking for, so the Rangers would not make an offer on Trevor Rogers. Wow, we got a lot of comments right there. Let me see if I can catch up with some of these. The man in case of baseball, the Yankees have not done that in case of beating the Astros. Huh? The man in case of baseball, the Yankees have not done that in case of beating the Astros. Not sure what you're trying to say. Rob Fazekas, Reynolds to Jays going back the other way, Jensen and prospects might make some sense. I mean, Pittsburgh is looking to add a catcher. Maybe they just flip Jensen there. I wonder if Jensen is flipped somewhere else, though, like we were talking at the top about him possibly going to the Angels to solve their catching needs. Padres were said to have their offer 14 years for $300, but MLB said they would not have allowed it because of the luxury tax. With the young Cabrera. Okay. Not sure if that would have been the thing. You're saying 14 years for who? Judge will never duplicate the same offensive numbers he had this year. I mean, his numbers were off the charts. I mean, he's 31 years old, is just entering the most productive years of his career. He was a late bloomer for the Yankees. I think Judge's numbers could actually stay at this level for at least another 2, maybe 3 years. And then even as high as his numbers are right now, even him coming down a little bit here and there, I think he would still be one of the most productive players in the Major League Baseball. Well, Rob, the reason why I pronounced your name correctly is I'm pretty sure there was a basketball player, I want to say for Spain at one point, that the Mavericks had as a, they had the draft rights to him. They never signed him. I'm not sure if it was Fazekas exactly, but it was very close as far as the name. But I do what I can, or I do the best I can to try to keep you guys updated. Reynolds, Syndergaard, and Stripling, I think those would be 3 great pieces to solve your needs, though, in Toronto. I'm not sure you get all 3. Maybe 2 of the 3 would be good gets. Bringing back Syndergaard to Toronto would be a great 5th starter in that rotation, I believe. Judge, you think they wouldn't have been able to bring in Judge? I don't think they would have had a problem with it as far as from a collective bargaining agreement issue. I think Judge's contract probably would have been, I didn't see what the actual numbers were for Judge for him, though. If it was 14 for $300, that's not even close, but it sounded like the offers were, or that the offer for Judge was 10 at $400. They never formally made the offer, though, from what people are talking about right now. I was saying Ric Flair used to say, beat the man, you got to beat the man, and they just haven't done that in the Astros case. Okay, now that makes more sense. But yeah, I mean, they haven't beaten the Astros yet, and even if they get all those big pieces in there, they still have to do it. Astros have a lot of confidence, so even if they have a worse team, because they have that track record, you're saying even if they get a little bit better team, that the Astros are still going to beat them. I understand what you're saying now. He's on a boat headed to the Bahamas. Sorry, James. I know you were really excited about them possibly bringing in Judge. Correa's possibility there. I still think they end up with one of the big free agents this year. I don't think they end up with multiples at this point. Most of every top free agent is off the board, and all the promise that this season held for the Giants basically landed on its face after Judge decided to go back to the Yankees. Could they bring back Correa? Absolutely. Are they going to have to overpay to do it? Absolutely. You're Hungarian? Okay. Makes some sense. I think he was playing on a Spanish team, is why I was saying Spain, but I think he actually is from Eastern Europe anyway. I want to say his name was Caleb Fizikis, something like that. Anyway, it was probably 5-6 years ago now that the Mavericks had him on their, or at least held the rights to him. They actually had some conversations about bringing him to the States. I want to say 2 years ago, and I think Memphis at one point did bring him over, signed him to like a 1-year deal, played a little bit, and then went back over to Europe to play basketball. Senga said on Twitter he will make his decision tomorrow. Really? Senga said that on his Twitter. Now I'm curious. I'm going to go look and see if they have a Twitter for Kodai Senga. People. I don't really have a translate for Japanese. Can't really tell what he said. Or translate bio. He likes manga. Okay. I don't know if this is his account or not, but if he actually said that on Twitter, I'm very excited about the possibility of him signing. I'm very curious where he goes, so we'll see where he goes on it. I I just did a quick Twitter search anyway of Kodai Senga just to see if I could find his page. I think I found it. It looks like he just created his Twitter about a year ago from the page I did find. It's all in Japanese though, so I can't really read any of it. But it does look to be him. It does look like he has a picture of him with his team at the top. But I'll be curious to see where he ends up signing. If you have that translated somewhere, whoever, I can't remember who said that. Cobra, you said that you found that on Twitter. Let us know where you found that, so that way we can figure out, if it's a real thing, those kinds of things. We'd really appreciate it. What is Reynolds' contract like? Does anyone know? I think he's got 2 years left on his deal right now. I say Rodon stays a Giant if they don't get Correa. I think that's very likely as well, because that would mean Correa goes to either the Cubs, maybe the Yankees. But that leaves a whole bunch of money and years available for the Giants to go out there and spend on starting pitching. Because it's pretty damn bad when reporters in New York are saying, are saying every time they sign players to crazy contracts and they never, and don't deliver in the playoffs. Well, I mean, they've traded for some big contracts as well because small market teams couldn't take them on. And so, like the Giancarlo Stanton contract, they took advantage of the Marlins being unable to keep him on the roster because of the total money that they gave him just ate up too much of their payroll, and so they had to get rid of him. So they jump on pieces like that. But of course, in free agency, they have the ability to sign those big name players. They're operating with big budgets. I mean, they have their own network for crying out loud. So the Yankees are going to have a good team. They've been the best team in baseball history, arguably, with all the championships that they have. And they're expected to be good. It's been surprising that they haven't won a championship since '09. I think this is one of the biggest droughts in Yankees history for not winning a championship. I'd have to go back and look, but it's pretty darn close. You heard it said on a TV show. Okay. What moves do you think the Giants do? I'm in San Francisco, and the fans are not happy. Twitter fans are blowing up. In-person fans are unhappy. Small businesses down here are unhappy. They need to do something. I think they're going to try to add one starting pitcher at some point. Not sure it's going to excite anybody in the Giants fan base unless it's a guy like Rodon. As far as big name players that they could bring in, Carlos Correa is probably the best option. Outside of that, I mean, the pickings are slim. You might be stuck, trying to save that money for next offseason, trying to steal a guy like Julio Urias away from the Dodgers after they try to bring in Shohei Ohtani. Maybe you could excite yourself about something like that. I mean, Urias does have connection to Zaidi. That would be something that could excite Giants fans, bringing in Devers, competing with the Yankees for him. Maybe go after Kodai Senga, or not Kodai Senga, but Shohei Ohtani next year. I think if you don't bring in Correa right now, I think you keep that powder dry and look forward to next offseason, and then you're going to have to convince some of those free agents to take bigger money, just like the Rangers had to do last year when they got Marcus Semien for 7 years, 175 million. They overpaid just a little bit by getting the extra years. Because they did that, that gave them the reasonable foot in the door to bring in Corey Seager. They instantly got that one done. They got the John Gray deal done. This year, because their success as far as bringing in players to improve the roster, the overall product wasn't better because the rotation was despicable to say the least. They had one good starting pitcher on the roster last year. John Gray was decent, but not healthy enough to stay with his performance. So they bring in the number one starting pitcher in the world right now, Jacob deGrom, when healthy. Again, asterisk by that, when healthy. They bring back Martin Perez, who pitched like an ace for the Rangers last year, gave him a ton of innings. They brought in an innings eater in Jake Odorizzi. John Gray, if he stays away from those blister issues that he had repetitively last year with the Rangers, they could have something there as a number 3-4 type starter. They bring in Andrew Heaney. If his numbers were to be believed in LA, again, another good starter. But you see how the Rangers had to overpay at the beginning for Marcus Semien to kind of get the ball rolling. Think how the Padres had to overpay for Eric Hosmer and then give a big contract out there for Manny Machado, even though I think that deal was a little bit cheaper than what I thought he would get. He could be a free agent next offseason as well. Giants fans, keep that one on your books. But things need to start looking, things need to turn around for the Giants, and if they don't with the Carlos Correa signing, I keep my powder dry. I save all of that money and I go after starting pitching next year. I go after third base next year. Those are the options I'd go with if I'm unable to bring in Carlos Correa. I don't spend anything if I don't have to. Giants can afford to sign Rodon and Correa. They would be vastly improved. They signed Mitch Haniger. Yes, they would. But again, if they don't get Correa, I would probably avoid signing Rodon, even though they need to bring in some starting pitching. You don't just want to give up on a year. But I would try to keep my powder dry. I think they'd have a good chance to sign some of those free agents next year. Now I'm looking forward to tomorrow. Yeah, it should be fun for the Senga deal. We have never always had a huge name, but we always have players that fans love. Posey, Panda, Freak, Milkman, Giraffe, Mad Bum. Fans deserve players. Yes, they do. Every day that goes by seems like less of an opportunity for the Giants to land somebody, and at this point, I believe the Sacramento River Cats might be a better than the big league club. That's hilarious. Now I know the Red Sox got Story. They wanted Bogarts out. I believe that was kind of their signaling that they're not going to spend at the top of the market for Bogarts. That's why Bogarts was pissed last year anyway when they brought him in, or when the contract offers were being given to him, the extension offers, they were all lowball offers, short-term deals, those kinds of things. Bogarts got 11 years. The contract he was offered by the Red Sox, I believe, was in the neighborhood of 5 or 6 years, something like that. It was a lower figure than he was hoping for, and that's part of the reason why he's no longer there. He was insulted by the offers he was given. Screw it, Jays go over the luxury tax anyway, go all in on Reynolds, Senga, and Syndergaard. I don't know if you get 2 starting pitchers. I think you could use one really good one, and then maybe a guy like Drew Smyly that you can put as a long reliever in your bullpen, flex to a starter when you need him. There's a lot of pitchers that fit that Drew Smyly quotient that could be in your bullpen as a long reliever. When your starting pitcher can't get out of the third inning, you need somebody to mop up innings for about 4 innings, and then sit him on your bench for another 3 days until he's recovered enough to go out there again. And then when your starting pitcher gets injured and is unable to go, have him give you a spot start. Maybe if he misses some time on the IL, you have a competent major league pitcher who can step in and fill those shoes. Manoah, Gosman, Senga, Berrios, and Syndergaard, but you're missing Hyun-Jin Ryu in that lineup there. Mr. Rob, plus it doesn't hurt that the commissioner of baseball making sure that Judge is a great player, but do you think he breaks the home run record without the juice balls? All right. I get that Houston is tired of, the cheating, the sign stealing stuff and how it's always being thrown at them, but I mean, the report came out that I want to say somebody from Sabre, somebody who has a lot of stuff about that. Anyway, I think that the balls being used anyway weren't necessarily juiced, if you will. I think they were experimenting with different baseballs to use, period. They weren't trying to do anything specific to help Aaron Judge, I'll put it that way. I feel like this weekend is going to be very active for some reason. I can feel it if Correa signs with the Yanks. I'm getting his jersey. Well, I think if he signs with the Yanks, it's going to be a long-term deal. That would be kind of the stick-it move to the Astros that Correa's been looking for. That's what some reports out there have him looking for, is that he wants to make some type of a statement saying, hey, you won a World Series without me. Now I'm going to stop your World Series, or the rest of your run, and I'm going to go on to win the World Series wherever I end up going. So if he ends up going somewhere, unless it's for max dollars to like the Giants or the Cubs, where he says, hey, I finally got my free agent deal, I'm good, I think that's the kind of statement Correa is wanting to make, but he does sound like a guy who wants to be on a winning team more than anything else. Giants can get Swanson, sure, but I wouldn't do it if I were the Giants. Outfield Gorilla, Gurriel, Reynolds, and Springer. That would be a pretty good outfield, Rob. Judge will never pass the home run records that Bonds accomplished. Maybe, but I mean, he started at a little older age. I think has more impact than anything else. That's the reason why he wouldn't do that. We'll pay Machado what he wants. Sure, but again, you brought in Bogarts. You brought in Soto now. You have to be able to get the contract done for Soto. I think you really should be able to keep Manny Machado there if you're a Padres fan, but there's going to be some options out there on the free agent market. And once you let a player hit free agency, you never know what could happen. I mean, just look at all the free agents that changed teams this year. Sure, Aaron Judge stayed, but up until that point, we saw Verlander change teams, DeGrom change teams. A lot of big names switched teams this year. White Sox, Victor Reyes agreed to minor league deal. Okay. I meant to say it doesn't hurt to have the Rob in your pocket. Also, tell what's worse, using trash cans to use or using Apple Watch to cheat, basically getting a slap on the wrist while the Astros get hit. The difference is when they were told, hey, don't do that again, basically set the groundwork that, hey, none of these things are going to be tolerated, and yet the Astros continue to do it. That's the reason why the Astros got hit while the Yankees got a slap on the wrist. I would include Biggio and Reynolds' deal with Jansen. That would be a decent deal for Reynolds there, but you're still going to need more. Swanson played 162 games this year. He was fantastic. He's been a good defender. He improved with his bat, but he's nowhere near the top-level shortstops in my opinion. I think he still needs to prove that bat is here to stay, as opposed to just one successful year. Really appreciate you guys joining us. We've got about 45 of you guys with us right now. Seems like we're getting stronger the later we go here, but make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. And join us here at the Upside. We cover the MLB, NBA, NFL, and the NHL. We'll keep you guys updated on everything that's happening from the hot stove. Make sure you turn on those notifications, and we'll update you anytime any breaking news happens. If you want to comment, ask us a question, feel free to do it. We check our comments on our videos all the time, so if you want to send us a comment on one of our videos, please feel free to do that as well. We'll try to keep as active with our audience as we can. And we actually, since we are now monetized, if you want to hit the super chat, you can. If you feel like you want to, contribute, we are finally monetized. Can finally do this to try to, make a full go at this and do this full time. So feel free to send us something if you'd like. Lineup: Reynolds, Springer, Guerrero, Bichette, Chapman, Kirk, Gurriel, Moreno. I think I'd mix up the batting order there a little bit, but I do get what you're saying there. I think your best piece on that team that nobody's really talking about is Bo Bichette, just how talented he is, how different that he is on that lineup more than any other player there. Gives them a speed element to their game. Springer still has a little bit of that. Reynolds would certainly help that for them as well, and Gurriel. But the Jays would have a great lineup if they did that. I mean, they already have a good one, but they still need to diversify that lineup just a little bit. Funny people think Tatis will get traded. He has a no-trade clause. Yes, he can request a trade, but I don't think the Padres are going to give up their best player. I don't know if Tatis Jr. is their best player. I think when all three players are right, Machado, Soto, and Tatis, all three are right there, neck and neck for the best player on that roster. I think Bogarts is a half step down from those players, but they have a really good roster right now. And again, I don't think they're going to trade him. I put the trade possibility right now below 1% for Tatis. But I think out of all the pieces on that roster right now, out of those four that I named, Bogarts, Soto, Machado, and Tatis Jr., he is the most likely to be dealt out of that group if somebody were to make a competitive offer. I'll put it that way. But do I think he will get traded? No. Could he decline the trade ultimately and decide to stay in San Francisco? Absolutely. But I think once you get to the point of, hey, I'm in the trade rumors, they don't want me here, that kind of thing, it's very rare for the player to ultimately pull that no trade clause. He might pull it just to get to a destination of his choice, but a team isn't going to be trading for him that's below 500. That he's not going to really have a chance to push for the postseason. Please explain how next year will be different for the Giants. They will still be in a bidding war with other teams. Exactly, but other teams that had money this year will not. So, for instance, the Texas Rangers had $75 million, $60 to $75 million that they were going to add in payroll. The Rangers next year could probably have between 30 to 45 million. They take a little bit of that money away. The Dodgers are going to have all kinds of money that they're keeping dry for Shohei Ohtani. Because they're in the market for Shohei Ohtani, if they do get him, that takes up a hefty portion of that payroll. And then, of course, they could still try to bring back Urias and maybe go after one of the other pieces out there. The Red Sox, they're not expected to win this year based on the roster they have right now. Devers, if I'm Rafael Devers, I don't want to come back to the Red Sox, even though they will have the money to bring him back. The Yankees are going to have stiff competition for him, but they're spending their money this offseason. So maybe the Giants will be able to outbid the Yankees for his services. Other teams that are looking to bring in players this offseason, for instance, Carlos Correa with the Minnesota Twins, they are going all the way to try to bring him back. They have contract offers of 1 year, 6 year, 8 years, and 10 years on the table, standing offers, and they're in constant communication with Correa's camp just to kind of see if they can keep him there. Rodon, as far as the starting pitching market, it's pretty much dried up. The pitching market wasn't very deep this year. It should be at least a little bit deeper next year. Scherzer could be a free agent, I believe, or is it this year or next year he can opt out of his deal? It's one of those years is a player option. I can't remember which, but the free agent market, all I'm saying about that free agent market is there's going to be a few more names on that list where the Giants are going to be the high bidder on a lot of those guys, and they should be able to show at least a little bit more progress with their pitching staff that they have and younger pieces on the roster that they're going to have some time with. Plus, they're going to have Jock Peterson's money off of the books. Brandon Crawford's money, I believe, comes off of the books as well. So they're not just going to have about $100 million to spend. They're probably going to have in the neighborhood of $150 million to spend next offseason, somewhere in there, $140 million. And I think they will be willing to go into luxury tax and sign whoever they need to. To that in baseball game by throwing at Correa's head 3 times, and I don't ever approve of anybody throwing at anybody's head in baseball. I think players who throw, like you can literally tell the difference between somebody trying to bean a guy and not. That's a serious thing when you try to throw at somebody's head. Players who do that, managers who allow that and condone that type of thing, I think they should do something a lot more serious than a couple game suspension or something like that. I think if they addressed it like they do domestic violence, not saying that their domestic violence policy is great, but giving them like a 30-game suspension on the low end. Remember, for Marcelo Zuna, something like that. Aroldis Chapman got that as well. Something like that would really send a message that, hey, no more throwing, and dock them pay for a certain period of time as well. I think they should work a little bit more on the domestic violence policy as well, but that's another issue. Everyone was talking about pitching and outfield for the Jays. Could you see them upgrade at second base? We saw them be willing to make a trade for Jose Ramirez last year. Kevin Biggio was one of the pieces, along with Relvis Martinez and a couple other prospects that they were willing to send to the Guardians for him. Ramirez is not being moved, so I could still see them making some improvements at second base. But just want to say thank you guys for joining us here tonight. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you haven't already, drop us a like. We cover the MLB hot stove season, which you can see with what we've been talking about so far tonight. NFL news, of course, OBJ possibly signing with the Cowboys. The Ravens right now have entered in as a late suitor for them. The Buffalo Bills. But it sounds like he might not even be healthy enough to join a team this year. So kind of keep your eyes peeled for that. Jimmy Garoppolo's out for at least the regular season. Could return at some point in the postseason as the San Francisco Giants push for a Super Bowl berth. And of course, in the NHL, the Toronto Maple Leafs, Mitch Marner just continues to keep rolling. 20-game point streak. They actually halted the Jason Robertson point streak at 18 games. So, a couple of really good performers so far this year in the NHL. And of course, in the NBA, LeBron James was back, I believe, tonight after missing a game due to injury. The season did not start out well for the Lakers anyway, but they're starting to get a little bit better. Which player will be the first to receive $50 million a year? Shohei Ohtani, Shohei Ohtani, Shohei Ohtani, and Shohei Ohtani. Just in case you weren't clear, Shohei Ohtani is going to get $50 million next year. Mark my words. By the way, the Yankees still kept cheating. If I'm not mistaken, you said that the Astros right then, why the Yankees weren't fine when Cole was basically using Stickum to make his pitches better. He was using that with the Astros too. I mean, I get that you're an Astros fan, Willard. I get it. And I get that you don't think it's fair that your team is viewed as the cheating, whereas the Yankees did something similar as far as the Apple Watch thing. But, the difference as far as the punishments was strictly how the timeline unfolded for how Major League Baseball is going to deal with those situations. That's why the Yankees got the slap on the wrist, as you said, and the Astros basically got hit with the GM and the manager getting suspended for a year and ultimately fired by Jim Crane. The players didn't receive any punishment. There was nothing taken away from the organization aside from those, and I think they lost a draft pick as well out of it. I can't remember. And of course, the fine to the organization. But the players on the field didn't feel the wrath, and that's why the fans around baseball think that the players were the ones that were doing the thing. The team, of course, should have stopped it, which is why the team was punished by Major League Baseball. But they feel that the players were not punished for what they did in that situation. And not that the Yankees players were either, but they had the opportunity or they had the responsibility, I should say, after the Yankees were slapped about their Apple Watch thing to resolve their ways, and they didn't. When you said you didn't apparently know that how hard it is to strike out a batter without it. Well, I mean, Garrett Cole is still one of the best pitchers in the game. I mean, almost all major league pitchers had a 200-point drop in their spin rates over the last year because of the sticky stuff. Garrett Cole was no different than anybody else, but we saw rates drop across the league. It wasn't just a Yankee-specific thing or a Garrett Cole thing. I get a lot of people like to, gang up on the Yankees, and I would have been right there with you when I was a kid because, they're the evil empire and all that. You didn't want to see the Yankees win. You wanted to see them lose every single time. But at a certain point, you just got to realize it's baseball. And, these players are just trying to do the best they can. I mean, there are some former Astros on that team that were there last year. I want to say Marwin Gonzalez was there. They're talking about bringing in Carlos Correa. Not saying that one team was right or one team was wrong. I'm saying this is the series of events that happened. There's no changing them. Yankees didn't have that same ultimatum that Major League Baseball had already set after the punishment that was given to the Yankees. If that had happened before the Apple Watch scandal, then we're talking about some very different punishment for the Yankees, but it was different, and that's what ended up happening. In your opinion, which player is the best all-around in the National League and American League? Good question. American League, it's not close. It's going to be Shohei Ohtani, just because of his impact on both the pitching side and the hitting side. If we were to take him out of the equation, then the conversation gets a whole lot more interesting. Welcome back, MVP. As far as in the American League, I mean, you'd probably have to start the conversation with some of the talented shortstops out there. Bo Bichette up in Toronto, Vlad Guerrero Jr. as far as a bat, but defensively not exactly the same. As far as best pitcher when healthy would be Jacob deGrom. But as far as best all-around player, Aaron Judge, I guess, would still be up there. He's still very good defensively in the outfield. Not that he's, the perfect defender, but he's still able to get the job done. And his stats are so much higher offensively than almost any other player in baseball. It's not, his bat really pushes him that far out there. On the National League side, when healthy, I would say Ronald Acuna. Manny Machado has the ability to carry a team. Bryce Harper. Those would be the players in the conversation for me. Fernando Tatis Jr., if he was able to stay healthy and not be caught up in the PED issues for ringworm, etc. But have you missed anything? Well, we saw a report anyway. I can't remember who said it. I want to say Cobra found somewhere that Kodai Senga said that he could be making his decision tomorrow. Not a whole lot of transactions today, but more rumors, more stuff coming out as far as negotiations between other teams. A lot of deals getting finalized today. But I just wanted to say thank you guys for joining us here tonight. If you guys want to rewatch this video afterward, I would appreciate that as well. If you guys joined us late, make sure you catch the beginning, kind of all the news that we saw off the top. Why say Acuna? As far as one of the best players in the American or National League, I see Rob bringing up Syndergaard's name a few times, and I thought I was the only one who knew he was on the free agent list. Nobody has brought up his name yet, and I think the Yankees would be a great fit for him. I wonder about the New York market for him. I mean, he's already familiar with it with the Mets. I do think he'd be better off in another situation, though. But he would be a good number 4, 5 type starter in the New York Yankees system. I think he'd be a better fit, though, in a place like Toronto or any other team that needs a number 4 type starter. At best, a number 3 when he's right. But we saw last year how that worked for the Phillies when they had to count on him. He just couldn't quite perform to the level of what you would expect a number 3 to be able to in a postseason series. And he could lengthen out that Yankees lineup or Yankees rotation, sure. But I think the Blue Jays would be a great fit for Syndergaard. He did start his career there before the trade to the Mets for Roy Hal, or was it who was the pitcher that they traded back then? Was it R.A. Dickey and the Jose Reyes trade? Was that the trade I'm thinking of? Oh, okay. You're trying to say that basically that they tried to treat them like they did SMU years ago. I don't think that was it at all. If they had wanted to do that, they could have suspended all those players, made it a whole Black Sox thing, etc. But baseball didn't try to do that. I mean, they took out their manager, they took out their GM, and it was the owner that fired them. It was not Major League Baseball. They literally suspended them for a year. We've seen suspensions like that in other sports. We've seen suspensions like that in baseball before. Not with this commissioner anyway, but with commissioners in the past. And this was a cheating scandal, so you can't get around that either. But I get how you feel like they were basically throwing the book at him, but it could have been significantly worse. That's all I'll say. But really appreciate you guys joining us. If you have any questions at any time, like I said, feel free to send us a question or a comment on any of our videos. Just to kind of recap everything, we saw a bunch of deals basically get finalized, all the lettering get done. We could finally see some transactions go with Rodon. Correa's market seems to be evolving rapidly. The Braves haven't spoken with Swanson very much at all. Sounds like they're content with moving forward with Vaughn Grissom as their shortstop. The Angels news came out that they were interested in bringing in Wilson Contreras from the Cubs before he signed the deal with the Cardinals. Sounded like the deal could have been 5 or 6 years on the table for him. I expect them to still try to bring in a catcher to help make that team a little bit better, more well-rounded. Possibly a guy like Sean Murphy or a Danny Jansen from the Jays, but we could see some trades over the next week. We didn't see a lot this week at all because the market was held up by those top-end free agents, but now things are starting to percolate. The only top free agent pitcher left is Rodon, unless you count Senga. But if those two get done, we could really see the trade market opened up. But thank you guys for joining us. Which player is more significant, best all-around every day, or best pitcher in baseball? I would say probably every day just because he makes an impact on 162 games. The best pitcher might make a start, make 35 starts a year, and he might give you a great chance to win that day, and he might have a positive impact on that franchise as a whole. When he pitches, it's a win day. But on the other side, I can also see players, one of 8 position players on the field, but he is in that lineup and does affect winning every single day. So I would still say the everyday baseball player is a little bit more impactful than the pitcher. But again, you can't win without pitching. So again, I can see it both ways. For me, though, I would lean more towards the everyday player. We both know for a fact, even if the Yankees were caught cheating, do you think that Rob would have Houston, example of what Houston did? I think if it had happened after after the Yankees had been caught, if the Yankees had done something again, or if they had, say another team had been caught doing the Apple Watch thing and they did the exact same thing as what Houston did, I think we could have signed the very same thing. Lack of institutional control is basically what Major League Baseball said Houston had done. That's why the GM, that's why the coach, the manager anyway, got hit with it. Right now, it's hard to believe that Atlanta could get Lamar for the NFL. Exactly. But here we are. Detroit could be there as well. But I just want to say thank you guys for joining us here tonight. Make sure you drop a like. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't. We will have a couple videos coming out for you tomorrow. And depending on if we get the Senga signing, the Correa signing, or Rodon, we might do a short live for you guys tomorrow night. But thank you guys for joining us. And as I said, make sure you comment on our videos. Hit those like buttons on those as well. And we'll try to answer your comments either in that comment section or in the live the next time we do it. But thank you guys for joining us. And thank you guys for making the last year so much fun and getting us to this point and making us as successful as we are. We owe all that success to you. Thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you guys again later on. Have a good one.